G'day folks, everything new under the sun. Alright, Cuban Missile Crisis, I mentioned it in the prior video. Let's have a little history lesson. Let's read about what the Cuban Missile Crisis was about. Um, Russia has subs and ships on the way to Cuba and Venezuela, likely with nuclear weapons on board, and other nuclear subs probably that we don't even know about, but this is Cuban Missile Crisis 2.0. This is Wikipedia. The Cuban Missile Crisis. The Cuban Missile Crisis is also known as October Crisis in Cuba, or the Caribbean Crisis, and that's where they're headed, was a 13-day confrontation between the governments of the United States and the Soviet Union when American deployment of nuclear missiles in Italy and Turkey were matched by Soviet deployments of nuclear missiles in Cuba. The crisis lasted from the 16th to the 28th of October 1962. The confrontation is widely considered the closest the Cold War came to escalating into full-scale nuclear war. So the United States put nuclear weapons in Italy and Turkey, and this caused the Soviet Union at that time to then say, well, we're going to deploy nuclear weapons outside, off the shores of the United States in Cuba. And at that time, that was, again, the closest the Cold War came to turning into full-scale nuclear war. Now, the same thing is happening, again, in Ukraine and Poland and the other nations where the United States is moving nuclear weapons to, or those countries who are interested in having those nuclear weapons stationed. And, of course, we had this. Now, this is a zero hedge. Russian warships steam for Caribbean as Ukraine tensions go global. So remember the idea of the Caribbean crisis or the Cuban Missile Crisis. This is what it was talking about. Now, here we have Macron. Reactions in Europe and America. This is War News 247. To Emmanuel Macron's map. He prepares public opinion for war. He's showing a map of Russia invading countries to the south. Ukraine has the right, according to international law, to use German weapons against targets in the Russian border area, it says. And so he's showing that map. He's trying to get the public aware. Certainly in Europe, they realize they are getting closer and closer to war. And Macron, it seems to be the leading figure pushing for it, which is interesting. Macron is a very interesting figure, and he was on my list for, if we are in those last days, then he's an interesting person for an antichrist sort of figure, a politician who came out of nowhere of sorts years ago and came into government, and now he seems to be, from the European standpoint, leading the Europeans and therefore NATO to war against Russia. Well, here is War News 247. In permanent combat formation off the coast of USA, Russian ships and the state-of-the-art submarine Yasin M with supersonic Zircon, Caliber, and Onyx. Great aeronautical mobilization and an announcement by Cuba. Cuba is basically coming out and saying, well, there's no nuclear weapons on board. Russian warships and at least one nuclear-powered submarine along with strategic bombers are being deployed off the U.S. coast, according to U.S. officials. Russian warships will head to Cuba and Venezuela after exercises are completed. They will remain in the region until the end of the summer to conduct new exercises in the fall. When was the whole Cuban Missile Crisis? Well, that was in October 1962 in the fall period. So interesting timeline there. Are there going to be exercises in the fall that go full-scale nuclear war? It is noted that Moscow did not warn Washington about these exercises and this military development. So this is interesting. There is no communication, apparently, between the U.S. and Russia, if this is accurate. And I would assume this is effectively unprecedented at this point, for them to not coordinate, to not surprise each other, but to move, potentially not just nuclear-powered subs, but subs with nuclear weapons on them, and ships and such into the region for a close proximity strike of the United States proper landmass. U.S. Navy is trying to determine whether the Russian warships and submarines are carrying nuclear missiles. They don't know. Or any special cargo for Cuba, maybe a nuclear weapon to save and to launch potentially from there, an extra place to fire from. It says Russia moves fleet and air force for military exercises due to growing U.S. support for Kiev, and it suggests that they're capable of projecting power globally that Russia is now. So Russia's coming into that position of the world's policeman, if you will. And if they beat the United States and NATO, in World War III, then they, along with China, probably the Russia themselves would be the new world superpower, the world's policeman, in some sort of cooperation with China. Now, China doesn't have the capability to project naval air superiority and otherwise around the world, but in cooperation with Russia, they would. So Cuba apparently came out and confirms that there is no nuclear weapons on these ships. So interesting. Why would Cuba come out and confirm that? Why not Russia? I don't know, but it's interesting. It says from June 12th to June 17th, the official visit to the port of Havana will be made by a group of ships of the Russian Navy, consisting of 4 vessels. They visit this visit is related to historic friendly relations between Cuba and Russia and strictly adheres to international norms, it says. The Cuban Defense Ministry said, adding that there are no nuclear weapons on the Russian ships. Now, would they tell us if there were? Well, absolutely not. So what can you believe at this point? Do you believe any government at this point? No. I suggest to you that you can't believe anything. Are the Russians telling the truth, it says? Why is there no official announcement from Moscow? Yeah, you would think they would be very clear, as to not escalate it out of proportion. And the fact that Russians are not saying this suggests that they very likely have nuclear weapons on board because, United States is an existential threat to Russia. And the United States has shown no interest in peace in Ukraine, no interest in de-escalating. So, this goes on, and it says it's the first simultaneous air and naval exercises Russia has conducted in the Caribbean since 2019. So certainly things are heating up. And it talks about the hypersonic missiles. Again, hypersonic missiles, does the U.S. have any ability to defend against hypersonic missiles? I don't think so. They don't even have hypersonic missiles themselves unless they've got something up their sleeves that they haven't told anybody about or hasn't leaked at all. But as far as we know, there's no defense against these, and there's no offensive hypersonic missiles either, that could head to Russia, for example. So, all right, I'm going to leave it there. This is a significant thing. Cuban Missile Crisis 2.0, and it's playing out almost exactly as the original one did. Go read Wikipedia. It's okay for this sort of historical information if you need to know what you're reading. But go read that, and it seems to line up. And are we looking for a fall start to World War III and similar to the Cuban Missile Crisis? All I got to say is get ready, folks. Get prepared. This is going to kick off. I don't know when, but things are super tense right now. And I think the governments are not telling us. I think they're keeping us distracted with Trump cases and, all the other things that are happening in the news so that we don't get concerned. But certainly in Europe, they're already telling citizens, your cellar is a good place for a bomb shelter. And Macron is going around and selling why NATO needs to give more weapons and troops to Ukraine. They're on a war footing in Europe. Meanwhile, over in the West here, we're living fat, dumb, and happy. Nobody cares. It's not in mainstream media news, any of this stuff. So I'm just saying, be aware and be prepared. Things are ramping up.